Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoy listening to today's stories. All of them are absolutely fantastic, as they always are. And just as much so, I love reading them as I do every time. These, I think, are better quality in terms of narration on my side. The stories themselves are always beautiful and amazing. But I just know that you guys will love them. And again, I will state this every single time. You guys have just been absolutely blowing shit out of the water, and it's made me feel absolutely amazing. The support and everything, it's honestly, it means a lot to me. Thank you, every single one of you. This was a long time ago. I was a teenager. My parents was not so strict, so I had a lot of freedom. I had 2 friends and they had their own friends as well, and one of my friends' parents owned a huge part of this forest. We went deep into the woods with a bunch of supplies and started making our own treehouse and forts. This was a big part of my childhood, building stuff with my friends, and this place became our sanctuary. For a long time, we'd spend a lot of our time away from adults. This event happened years after we built this place, initially, and also after we rebuilt it because it got destroyed one time. But that's another interesting story for a different time. This is a backstory for the events I'm about to recall. Me and my one friend spent the night at our sanctuary we built, which none of us had ever done before. We only hung out there, then went home. We all planned to spend the night together because it would be fun. Most of our friends weren't allowed to spend the night there though, because of their parents, and the other thing that was allowed chickened out because he was too afraid. So it was just me and one other person, my close friend's cousin, which we weren't close at the time and we fought a lot, but surprisingly, we got along very well that night. We spent most of the day swinging from trees, climbing from them, and hanging out on this tire rope swing while talking. It was a normal day. Then we laid down for some rest at around 9 p.m. and about 10 minutes later, after laying down, in our bed, our sleeping bags, talking to each other, under our makeshift tents, we heard ruffling. I sat up and saw a very tall silhouette of something that looked to be humanish. It was transparent. I could see right through it. I squinted and froze, and it very quickly climbed up this tall tree. When I looked at it, it disappeared. I was in complete disbelief and shock. I had no idea if I saw what I just saw or if I hallucinated it. I wasn't scared in this moment, actually quite perplexed. Being young and worried though, I said to my friend we should leave. Not wanting it to hear me, I got close to his ear and I just said, "There's something in the woods looking at us." After I said that, I saw his facial expression turn into fear. So we got up and started walking down the path out of the woods, calmly. I didn't want to sprint, because it might chase, and I also wasn't even sure I saw anything. I'm just not taking a chance. We both very shortly after that started leaving and got this weird feeling of deja vu and confusion. Like we were hit with hard drugs or something, except we don't do drugs and only ate food from our house. No hallucinogenic plants, at least in our part of the country. Nothing. Everything was so slow and I felt disoriented. But we continued to walk in this direction for quite a while, stumbling in the darkness, because our mental state, and I realized we should have been out of the forest by now. I knew this was the way out, 110%. It was. because I've been going in and out of this place for years, even in the dark. Yet, I didn't recognize all the trees around us, just the path. It was like our surroundings were changing. My friend randomly yelled, "Yeah, I'm coming," as I'm looking in the opposite direction from him, and I turned around and very confusingly asked him, why is he saying that? He says his mom is calling his name to help him out of the forest. I hear nothing at all. I tell him I don't hear anything, and he looks at me like I'm insane. And as he walks off the path and into the forest, I grab his arm and pull him back because I don't want him to get lost. That's when my friend sees the transparent thing. The thing that I saw earlier, sitting, perched on a tree branch, in the direction of his mom, the very same that was calling for him. And he points it out to me. Its transparency is almost like a heat wave effect. We stared at it for 10 seconds in disbelief. It looked like a transparent being, but we were trying to discern if it was something else, and we were just imagining it being alive. There was no movement, but then it hunched down like it's trying to stalk or be stealthy, and it quickly climbed up the tree a little more and goes to the next one, then the next one, getting closer to us. We don't hear it at all. It's completely silent. Its silence is exemplified by the fact that all the other creatures have went completely silent, which I had only begun to realize in that very moment that not a single bug or animal has made a sound since we started leaving. This is when our curiosity of if we're both tripping and we were mistaking something turned to fear once we began to see it move. Once it got above us though, the only thing we heard is the crunching of the branch as its weight has put everything on it. Every little sound that it's made is so distinct, it's so quiet and remote. We can't see it because the top of the trees are so dark. We start actually running, terrified, not walking anymore. We hear noises in the trees above us until it fades away ahead of us as it ran ahead, but the sound was a lot quieter. Then, if a normal animal was running in the tree to tree as if the thing was light, but it wasn't. It wasn't very small, so that made no sense. We still kept running forward despite it sounding like it went ahead, and we end up back at the place we started. Many minutes later of walking, and we were back at this place after running for like 20 seconds. It's impossible. But instead of staying on the ground, we climbed to the top of the treehouse with our items as quickly as possible and closed the door, wedging a small piece of plywood on it to keep it shut. We hear something climbing up and extremely odd noises as well, like mimicking noises of rain and wind, but there's no water seeping into our treehouse with cracks in it, and it wasn't wet when we left. This persisted for a minute, and we didn't hear from it again. I'm pretty sure at this point it had left, but we spent the rest of the night there until the sun came up anyway. When we checked his iPod Touch for the time, this is right after we closed the door. It was 5 a.m. We started laying on the ground at 9 p.m. 8 hours passed in less than 40 minutes of time. Hours after we could start to see the sun through the treehouse. Then we went home. I no longer talked to this friend, but after this incident, we discussed it and said everything from both our perspectives, and we randomly brought it up to each other every few months and relived it, making sure we were still on the same page about what happened and what we remember. I never spent the night out there again, and I didn't even let myself stay out there past 5 p.m. for a very long time. This is my story, and I'd be willing to take a polygraph test if the opportunity ever arises. A few years back, I was lying awake in bed. It was a quiet Sunday morning. I'm usually the first one awake in my house on the weekend. Married, 3 kids. I remember this so vividly and clearly because we were in the middle of painting our bedroom and had the curtains off and the room was blindingly bright. I was awake in the bed for about 10 minutes, just laying there with my wife asleep, thinking of the day ahead when I heard someone coming up the stairs. Our home is 120 years old. Squeaky original flooring. I've heard this sound hundreds of times from my room. Typical layout at the house of the top of the stairs. One main hall with all of our bedroom doors branching off. Mine being the last one at the end of the hall. I can tell which door in the hall someone was walking to with my eyes closed and certainly know if someone is coming to mine because I'm the last door. Oftentimes my children go downstairs for water early, and I assumed this was the case. I heard the steps coming up the stairs, and once they reached the top, I could tell they were coming to my room while I was still laying down, so I turned my head to greet what I thought was one of my kids. What happened next is burned into my memory forever. A small head peered around the door frame and looked directly at me. Maybe 3.5 feet from the floor. All I see is what looks like a boy with almost black hair. A disheveled bowl cut, white skin and black rough cut holes for eyes. We were both startled, and it immediately dashed away. Till this day, I don't know what launched me forward. My instinct was to either convince myself what I just saw and catch this thing or find out if it was one of my kids and I was hallucinating. It was literally a 1.5 seconds between the time I saw it and me leaping to the doorway looking into the hall. The thing just vanished. I went into my daughter's rooms one by one and they were all very much asleep. I searched the house basement to attic. Nothing. This house has many stories that I could share, but this one was unlike anything myself or my family has ever experienced. I believe in the paranormal, but honestly, never thought anything like this would ever happen to me. I don't know if it was a ghost or a demon or something else. My brain is still trying to process this. I was having a little bit of trouble sleeping last night, so I went into my living room to watch some TV or just play around on my phone until I got tired. I just turned off the lights and was getting ready to go back into my room and something pinned me to the couch. I wrestled really hard to get away, but it felt like, I don't know, what a picture it would feel like going really fast, like what I imagine, like G-force holding me down or like a bunch of weight evenly distributed throughout my body. I wrestled free twice. The first time I got away for a couple seconds and then got pinned down again. The second time, I managed to get free and get up and try to make it to the door. And I got maybe 2 feet from the door and I got knocked to the floor and got dragged back to the couch and pinned down again. And this lasted for a few minutes. And I fought every single fiber of my being and I was still able to get back to the door a second time. And I closed it and the door and it just stopped. What should I do? Will it come back? What was it? Is it still here? This happened in January of 2019. My stepdad had been in our family's life for 30 years before he was diagnosed with cancer. He never had any biological children, but he had me and my sister, and we couldn't have asked for a better stepdad or a granddad for our children. I was with him when he was diagnosed, and with him for all of his treatments. From the very beginning, there was no question of who could take care of him. It was going to be me. He and my mother were split up at the time, and it just seemed natural that I would be the one to do it because of how close we were. And honestly, I considered it an honor. Unfortunately, his progress was not very good, and they gave him less than a year to live. He barely made it 6 months after his diagnosis. He was in the hospital for the last 6 days of his life. He had a DNR, and as hard as it was, I didn't argue with him about it. 2 days before he passed, he was in and out of consciousness and was barely able to talk. His last night, he was able to communicate that he really wanted me to go home and check on his dogs. This was just after 3 o'clock in the morning. I told him I would do that, and then I would go right back. He gave a small smile and nodded. It took 20 minutes for me to get home, and 10 minutes after walking through the door, the hospital called and said he had passed. I felt so guilty for leaving until I thought he knew there was already someone with the dogs, but he insisted that I check on them. Perhaps he didn't want me to be there at the time. I don't know. I still don't know. Now, what I do know is the morning after he passed, I had a missed call from his phone that had been in my purse the whole time he was in the hospital. The call was made at 3:47 a.m., and the voicemail that was left said, "Thank you for everything, sweetheart. I love you." That message was left in my stepdad's perfect, loving voice, not the raspy, out-of-breath, strained voice he had moments before he died. Some people have said that it had just been an old message that I just received that morning, but either way, I thought it was amazing. My sister and I were driving home around midnight after the mother's flight from Montreal to Province was canceled. The both of us were extremely tired and angry because of the situation, so that may have played a part on the attachment, but I digress. On the road leading into town, there's a bridge that overlooks a large wooded area by the river. Sitting on the edge of a bridge was what looked like a man dressed in all gray. We couldn't see his face or make out any features because it was dark and we were driving over 110 kilometers per hour. For a moment, we were stunned, and I asked my sister if I should call the police because it could have been somebody in trouble or somebody who was considering jumping off of the bridge. We decided to let the police office know via non-emergency, but nothing came up out of it. Anyway, I just woke up from a disturbing dream, and I know it's a bad omen, or something worse. In the dream, I came home to our 2 cats who passed away recently sitting in our kitchen. We knew something wasn't right, but we decided to try and pet them. The female cat growled and hissed at me, trying to bite me as I got closer. That's abnormal because she was extremely affectionate and gentle. It's foggy as to how we came to this conclusion in the dream, but we round up trying to do an exorcism after realizing they weren't our cats, but demons taking their forms. In the middle of the exorcism, they transformed into wild dogs, biting and snarling as we chanted in an attempt to banish them. Near the end, somehow, the exorcism failed, and the dogs escaped the room. And that was the end of the dream. I'm a deeply religious person, and I've never had a dream like this before. I've had silly nonsense nightmares and auditorial, visual hallucinations my whole life that I knew were fake. They have never really upset me after the fact, but this was different. I apologize if this sounds preachy, because that isn't my intent. I am not trying to convert anybody or advertise my beliefs. I am a lay reader at an Anglican church, and my sister is a Norse pagan. I respect all. I just wanted to mention that. I'm terrified of the possible implications of this dream. It could be a bad omen, sent from the Lord. It could be something demonic messing with my head. I don't know. But I'm having a panic attack, and I just needed to tell somebody. I was home alone that night, and I was watching TV. Just some crappy shows as usual. 2 hours went by, and then I saw this weird creature outside my window. I thought it just was a bird since it passed my window so fast. 3 days later, and I was home alone again. I kept having this weird feeling that somebody was watching me, so I looked out the window, but I didn't see anything. I wasn't very convinced that I was alone, so I waited a few more minutes and then I saw it again. It's kinda hard to describe, but it had pale skin and blood stains on it. Although, I could never catch the other stuff of how the head looks, for example. It always passes by my window. It's like it's running from it, time to time. So I joined a paranormal community on another social media app. Many told me that it was a demon I disturbed. If so, I don't know how I did that. I'm not scared of it, so I guess that's good. Apparently, if I am, it would kill me, but I'm not sure anymore. I haven't seen it in weeks now. I wonder where it went. So to begin, I'm a 29-year-old homeowner. 2 months ago, I was given my grandparents' old home that belonged to my grandfather's grandparents. It's a generation home, back to the 1850s anyway. I was hesitant to move, but felt it's the least I could do, as it was their wish for me to have a basically huge estate with 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a finished basement that's been renovated, and an old school vintage underground cellar that my grandfather used to store wine. Anyway, fast forward a week after moving in, I met one of the neighbors. They say I'd live 3 house spaces away since I have a huge terrain. She says hi and says that it's finally nice to have someone else in the neighborhood who has a daughter for her daughter to play with. It took an instant red flag moment, but brushed it off. I clarified I don't have a daughter. Then she explains to me that every night around 9 p.m., she sees the shadow of a little girl within the room facing the side of the house. I thought she was crazy, but it's been torment since I decided to paint and renovate the godforsaken wine cellar. I'm being woken up by children giggling, and I've been poked, tugged at multiple times. My keys have been misplaced on 4 occasions, and my dog, who's a 100-pound English bull terrier, who's protective and the bravest boy I know, has whimpered and growled continuously around 3 a.m. in the morning. Another issue I'm having is throughout the day, I have heard 3 knocks, like if someone knocked on my door 3 times, and it stops. The other night, my girlfriend stayed over and says when I went out to get food, she also heard knocks on 3, but this time it was louder. I've also heard my name called, but with ringing as if it felt like deja vu. Any ideas or advice here? Sometimes things happen, regardless of whether or not we believe. But when you believe, it is accepting the problem to solve it, and that makes the difference. A few years ago, I lived with another family in the same house, and they had a son. with whom I talked sometimes. There was no problem, nothing to worry about. But one night, he got up from where he slept in the middle of the night and began to cry. His parents calmed him down, but he had his eyes closed. A few days later, I found out that he was a sleepwalker. He had recently started to be, but there was no reason. Okay, nothing happens. It will calm down with time. Weeks and months passed, and on several occasions he got up, making noises as if scared or wanting to cry. I read that it can be normal in sleepwalkers, but he has always got up, wanting to go to the same place. His older brother would wake up and carefully put him to bed again. Still, for some strange reason, I felt scared. Well, weeks went by, and he didn't get up. Maybe the sleepwalking is disappearing. Until one night, I had a pretty scary dream about him. In the dream, everything resembled real life. The house, the time, the darkness of the night. I was standing near where he slept. Suddenly, I saw how he got up, but this time, he spoke clearly. He said, "I have to go," and began to take a few slow steps towards the door of the room. Turning to look at the door, there was a face looking at him. The thing, or that someone, I don't know how to define it. It said, "Come here," repeatedly. I was terrified. I forced the boy back to where he slept, but he had more strength, and he escaped me. He left with that thing. The appearance of that thing was horrible, like an old man with a disfigured face and an extremely thin body. When I woke up, I told everyone about my dream, and this worried them a little. But what else could they do? The doctor didn't say anything that would help. Recently, they took him to a witch doctor in town. I don't know how to explain what he does, but it's things related to curing with herbs and curing things like curses. Then, he was cured, and he is no longer a sleepwalker. But this convinces me that there is more than meets the eye, and you have to be careful. This is a true story, and if you don't believe in it, fine. I don't believe in many things, but for those of us who believe in this, and some of us have had horrible things happen, we know what this is. Something real in our lives. I try to summarize this, so as not to make it very long. That there is more than meets the eye is a worrying reality. Hi, my name is Kat, and ever since I was a kid, my mom talked about me talking to ghosts. My mom has experienced the same thing, so has her mom, and it goes on and on with the women in our family. I've talked to relatives that have passed on, along with seeing an apparition of them. My grandmother has since ignored it, until I asked her about someone who claims to be her brother and talks about very harsh family details sometimes. And she refuses to tell me a name. Well, backstory over. I live with my grandmother and have had this issue for a while with this one thing, I guess I should call it. At first, it was only appearing in photos, but now it's making the energy of the house feel heavy. It stays in the basement bedroom, and when I go down there, it bangs on the door, tries to turn the door handle, and at night, sometimes, it growls, and in a deep voice goes, "Hello." I hear something breathing in my room sometimes, and my dogs refuse to go into the basement and refuse to go into my room. I feel so angry all the time, and it follows me out of the house. I can tell because my eyes get watery. I feel heavy, and I get goosebumps, along with just the feeling of something constantly behind me. This hasn't bothered me until it decided to mess with my Nana. My Nana is a sweet lady that doesn't need any issues with the paranormal. Well, the other night she woke up with the feeling of being choked and seeing something stand above her bed. She closed her eyes and said the Lord's Prayer, and it went away. She has me go downstairs now to do the laundry, fold the clothes, and clean up. Well, I guess I messed up pretty bad because I finally saw the apparition in daylight. It's always been a feeling or only seeing it at night. It was standing in the corner staring at me as I was folding laundry, and I immediately got angry at it for messing with Nana. So I looked at it and I went, you know what? Fuck you. You're just one big spooky ass ghost. I turned my back to it so I could load the washer, and the bedroom door slammed shut. Now, every night, it watches me sleep and keeps reaching out to touch me. Can anyone help me come up with any ideas to get rid of this thing? It was a week after my mother's death. I had found her myself. 2 days after she passed. It was traumatizing, but at the same time, I was 6 months pregnant and had a good friend of mine in need of some help. The only available room in my home was my mom's, so I decided to sleep there for a week, where she died, and let my friend take my room given the circumstances. I was going through shock still, so I didn't feel weird about it. I felt comfortable and close to my mom, so I fell asleep, no problem. In the middle of the night, it was like a dream, and I felt her body hover over me. Her arm stretched out towards me. The emotion was so intense, I began sobbing. So much, I started waking from my sleep as I reached out towards my mom's hand and she said, Stacy, you're all I had. And still sobbing, I replied, you're all that I had too, Mom. As I was now awakened and saw and felt her body float further away from mine, her beautiful aura dissipating into some unknown dimension above, and immediately I felt her peace, a sweet release of all of her worries. My mom had a rough life. She deserved so much more than she received, and because of this, she was maybe not the most consistent in presence, but her love was amazing, and all she ever wanted me to know was how much she loved me. Every time I encounter an old friend of hers, or something, they all tell me, she loved you so much. You were her world. And I feel this in her continuing to send this message of love every time I need it. This is only one of many experiences I've had, but for the most pleasant, I wanted to share, and I hope something uplifting for you. Thank you everyone for listening. If your story was told, I'm glad I'm the one who could tell it. I appreciate all the love and support. I hope you enjoyed today's stories as much as I did reading them.